You have no business here, Mom. Seriously, just go home. Those words didn't just sting. They felt like a physical slap across the face. Imagine standing on a piece of land that you and your late husband bought with blood, sweat, and tears 30 years ago. Land that holds the echoes of your life together, only to have your own flesh and blood treat you like a trespassing stranger. That is exactly where I found myself last Tuesday. My daughter, Jessica, who is 24 years old and apparently thinks she is the queen of the world, was standing in front of the old barn with her arms crossed, looking at me with this mixture of pity and annoyance that made my blood boil. The sun was beating down on us, the kind of humid heat that makes your shirt stick to your back within seconds. The grass around us was overgrown because I hadn't been able to mow it properly since Mark passed away 8 months ago. And there she was, wearing pristine white sneakers in the mud, telling me to stay out. She wasn't just asking for space. She was claiming territory. Territory that, legally speaking, she had absolutely no right to claim yet. But she didn't know that part. She thought because her dad had promised it to her someday in casual conversation over barbecue ribs 10 years ago, that someday meant right now, and that my opinion was just background noise she could mute whenever she felt like it. Before I tell you exactly what she said next that made me almost scream, I want to know who else is dealing with family drama today. Pause the video for a second and drop a comment down below telling me where you are watching from and what time it is in your city. I love seeing how global this community is, and honestly, knowing I'm not the only one dealing with craziness helps me keep my sanity. Okay, done. Let's get back to the mess. So, I had driven out there just to check on the fence line. We had a bad storm recently, the kind that knocks down branches and tears up shingles, and I was worried about the perimeter. I wasn't checking on her. I didn't even know she was out there. But when I pulled my old truck up the gravel drive, the tires crunching loudly, I saw her shiny new sedan parked right in the middle of the clearing. And she wasn't alone. She had some guy with her holding a clipboard and a laser measure pointing at my barn. Naturally, I got out of the truck. I didn't run over screaming. I just walked up, shielding my eyes from the sun, and asked, "Jessica? What's going on?" She spun around like I had caught her stealing cookies from the jar, but instead of looking guilty, she immediately went on the offensive. That is her defense mechanism and always has been. Attack before you can be attacked. "I'm busy, Mom," she snapped, not even introducing me to the guy with the clipboard. "We're doing a walkthrough. You really shouldn't be here right now. It is distracting." Distracting? I am the owner. But I bit my tongue for a second because I didn't want to cause a scene in front of a stranger. I took a deep breath, smelling that familiar mix of pine needles and damp earth that always reminded me of Mark. I tried to be the calm parent. I tried to be the bigger person, which feels like the only role I ever play these days. I said, "Honey, I just came to check the fence." "And who is this?" She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck in the back of her head. "This is a contractor, Mom. Obviously. We are planning the renovation for the guest house conversion. Now please, can you just leave us to it? You are messing up the vibe." The vibe. She was worried about the vibe while she was actively planning a renovation on property she didn't own, using money she definitely didn't have, without asking the person whose name was on the deed. That was the moment the sadness turned into cold, hard anger. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow burn starting in my chest and working its way up. I looked at the contractor, who looked incredibly uncomfortable, shuffling his feet and looking at the clouds like he wished he could fly away. Then I looked back at my daughter. She looked so confident, so sure of her place in the world. She had this arrogance that comes from never having been told no in a way that really stuck. "Jessica," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "you cannot just renovate the barn. We haven't discussed this. Your father and I built that barn by hand. It needs structural work before you can even think about." He cut me off. And this is the part that plays on a loop in my head whenever I try to sleep. She put her hand up, palm facing me like a traffic cop stopping a speeding car. "Stop. Just stop. Dad isn't here, Mom. It's just us. And he wanted me to have this place. He told me 1,000 times. So technically this is my project and you are just in the way. You need to stay out of it. Stay out of the planning, stay out of the meetings, and stay off the property when I'm working. You're too emotional about it to be logical." Too emotional. That was rich coming from a girl who once cried for 3 days because her favorite coffee shop discontinued a seasonal latte. But she hit a nerve. Bringing up Mark, using his memory as a weapon to push me off the land we built together? That was low. Even for her. I stood there, feeling the heat of the sun and the heat of my rage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her right then and there that she was standing on my dirt, breathing my air, and that she was about to be in for a rude awakening. But I didn't. I realized in that split second that arguing with her there in the mud wasn't going to work. She was convinced she was right. She was convinced she was the owner in every way that mattered. She needed a reality check, but not the kind you give with a shouting match. She needed the kind of reality check that comes with legal paperwork and bureaucracy. The kind that hurts because it is undeniable. So I looked her dead in the eye. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly. "Wait, Jessica," I said. "If that is how you want to play this. If you want me to stay out, I will stay out. Completely." She smirked, thinking she had won. Thinking she had bulldozed her old, emotional mother into submission. "Good," she said, turning her back on me to face the contractor again. "Glad we understand each other." I walked back to my truck, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I wasn't shaking from fear. I was shaking from the sheer effort it took not to drag her by the ear like a toddler. She watched me leave in the rearview mirror, probably thinking she had just cleared the final hurdle to her dream renovation. She had no idea that by telling me to stay out, she had just locked herself out of the one thing she needed most. She wanted independence. She wanted to be the boss. Fine. I was about to give her exactly what she asked for, and she was going to hate every single second of it. Driving away from the property that afternoon, I had to pull over about a mile down the road because my eyes were so blurry with tears I couldn't see the asphalt. It wasn't just the anger of being told to stay out of my own land. It was the crushing weight of the memories attached to that place. To Jessica, that plot of land is just an asset. It is a vibe. It is a potential Airbnb goldmine or a cool backdrop for her Instagram stories. But to me, that land is the story of my entire marriage. It is the physical manifestation of 30 years of sacrifice, and seeing her treat it like a cheap toy she found in a cereal box broke something inside me. Let me take you back to 1994. Mark and I were newly married, broke as a joke, and living in a basement apartment that smelled permanently of damp carpet. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but we had this crazy dream of owning a few acres where we could eventually build a house and maybe raise some kids. We found this plot of land, the same one Jessica was standing on in her pristine white sneakers, and it was a disaster. It was overgrown, swampy in the middle, and filled with rusted scrap metal from the previous owner. But Mark saw potential. I remember standing there in cheap rubber boots, holding his hand while he pointed at a patch of weeds and said, "Evelyn, imagine a porch right there. Just imagine it." We ate ramen noodles for 3 years straight to save up the down payment. We skipped vacations. We drove cars that broke down every other Tuesday. When we finally bought it, we didn't hire contractors with clipboards. We were the contractors. Every single fence post on that perimeter line was dug by Mark. I mixed the concrete. We spent our weekends sweating, bleeding, and arguing over measurements, but we were building something that was ours. That old barn she wants to renovate? Mark built that with his buddies over a summer. I remember him falling off a ladder and breaking his wrist, then wrapping it in duct tape because he refused to stop working until the roof was shingled before the rain came. That barn has his literal blood and sweat in the wood grain. That is the context Jessica just doesn't get. She arrived in our lives when we were slightly more established. She didn't see the struggle, she only saw the stability. And I have to be honest with myself here. Mark and I, we created this monster. We were so happy to finally be parents that we spoiled her rotten. Mark was the classic fun dad. He couldn't say no to her. If she wanted a pony, he'd find a way to get her a pony lesson. If she wanted the newest phone, he'd work overtime to buy it. He loved her so fiercely that he forgot to teach her the value of earning things. I remember the specific barbecue she mentioned, the one where she claims he gave her the land. It was about 10 years ago. Jessica was 14, maybe 15. We were sitting out by the fire pit roasting marshmallows. Mark had a beer in his hand, watching the sunset over the tree line, looking satisfied with his life. He put his arm around her and said, "You know, princess, one day this will all be yours. You'll take care of it for us, right?" He meant one day in the distant future. He meant one day, when we were both old and gray or buried in the ground. He meant it as a legacy of stewardship, a torch to be passed down with respect. But Jessica? She heard, "It is yours." She filtered out the one day and the responsibility part and just heard ownership. She took a sentimental fatherly moment and filed it away as a binding verbal contract. As she got older, the entitlement grew like a weed we forgot to pull. When she turned 18, she expected a brand new car, not the used Honda we offered. When she graduated college, debt-free thanks to our savings, she expected us to fund a gap year in Europe. We pushed back a little, but Mark always caved. "She's our only girl, Ev," he would say. "Let her be happy." But since Mark passed away, that happiness has turned into something ugly. It hasn't even been a year, and instead of grieving with me, she has been circling the assets like a shark. At the funeral, she was already talking about selling his truck. 2 weeks later, she was asking about my life insurance policy. And now she had fixated on the land. She started calling it her inheritance in casual conversation. "When I develop my inheritance," she would say to her friends on the phone. I let it slide because I was too exhausted from grief to fight her. Thought it was just talk. I thought she was just processing her loss by dreaming about the future. I didn't realize that while I was visiting Mark's grave and trying to figure out how to live life as a widow, she was drawing up blueprints. I didn't realize that her dreaming was actually plotting. She genuinely believes that because she is Mark's daughter, his death automatically transferred all authority to her. She views me not as the co-owner and partner who built that life with him, but as a placeholder. An obstacle. A tenant in her future kingdom who needs to be managed or, as she put it, told to stay out. Sitting in my truck on the side of the road, the engine idling, I wiped my face and looked in the rearview mirror. I saw a woman who had spent 30 years building a foundation for her family, only to be treated like a trespasser. The sadness began to evaporate, replaced by that cold clarity I mentioned earlier. She thought the history of the land gave her rights. She thought her father's love gave her ownership. But she was forgetting the most important part of the equation: the paperwork. Mark loved her, yes. But Mark trusted me. And in the eyes of the law, feelings don't sign deeds. Signatures do. If she wanted to play the "this is mine" game, she was about to learn that you can't renovate a house if you don't hold the keys. For 3 agonizing days I actually listened to her. I stayed away. I sat in my kitchen staring at the coffee maker, trying to convince myself that maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe, just maybe, she was only planning. You know how kids are these days with their vision boards and their Pinterest pins. I told myself she was just manifesting a renovation and that no actual hammers would swing without my permission. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt because she is my daughter, and I wanted to believe she wasn't capable of completely bulldozing me. I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. The wake-up call came from Mrs. Higgins, my nearest neighbor to the land. Mrs. Higgins is 70 years old, has eyes like a hawk, and has never minding her own business a day in her life. She called me on Friday morning while I was folding laundry. "Evelyn," she practically shouted into the phone, "why is there a dumpster the size of a swimming pool blocking the main gate? And why are they tearing the siding off Mark's barn?" My stomach dropped through the floor. I didn't even answer her. I just grabbed my keys, left the laundry in a pile on the sofa, and drove like a woman possessed. The drive usually takes 20 minutes. I think I made it in 10. As I got closer, I didn't need Mrs. Higgins to tell me what was happening because I could hear it. The screech of metal, the thud of heavy wood hitting an empty metal container, the shouting of men working. Sounded like a war zone. When I pulled up, the scene was worse than I could have imagined. That walkthrough from Tuesday wasn't a consultation. It was the prelude to an invasion. There was indeed a massive orange dumpster sitting right on the hydrangeas I had planted for our 25th anniversary. A crew of 4 men was swarming the barn. One of them was using a crowbar to rip off the old, weathered barn wood. The wood Mark had salvaged from a historic mill because he loved the grain. They weren't carefully removing it, they were shattering it. Splinters of my husband's hard work were flying through the air, landing in the mud to be trampled on. And there was Jessica. She wasn't wearing the white sneakers today. She was wearing brand new work boots and a custom pink hard hat, holding a phone up to record herself. She was filming content. I watched as she posed in front of the destruction, smiling for her camera, probably captioning it, "Demolition Day," or "New Beginnings." I slammed my truck door and the sound made her jump. She lowered her phone and the smile vanished instantly, replaced by that same defensive glare from Tuesday. "I told you to give me space, Mom," she shouted over the noise of a circular saw. "You literally cannot listen to simple instructions, can you?" I marched right past her space and into her face. Space. Jessica, look at this. You are destroying the barn. You didn't ask me. You didn't get permission. Who are these people? I hired them, she yelled back, stepping into my personal space to assert dominance. I took out a personal loan, okay? I put it on my credit. I'm paying for it, so I don't need your permission. This is an investment. I'm turning this dusty old shack into a modern guest loft. It's going to pay for itself in a year on rental apps. You should be thanking me for increasing the property value instead of screaming like a banshee. I looked over her shoulder and saw a worker toss Mark's old workbench, the one with his initials carved into the leg, into the dumpster. It landed with a hollow crash that echoed in my chest. You threw away his bench, I whispered, my voice shaking. Jessica, that was your father's. He built your first dollhouse on that bench. She rolled her eyes, a gesture so casual it felt cruel. It was full of termites, Mom. It was garbage. You have to stop hoarding the past. Dad is gone. The bench is just wood. The barn is just a building. You are so obsessed with keeping things exactly how they were that you're letting them rot. I am the only one actually doing something with this legacy. It is not your legacy to destroy. I snapped, my control finally snapping. I am the owner of this property. Me. Not you. You cannot just tear things down because you have a vision. Then came the moment that froze me solid. Jessica laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was cold and dismissive. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so the workers wouldn't hear, but making sure every word landed. God, you are delusional. Mom, look at you. You're old. You're tired. Dad bought this land for the future. He bought it for me. He told me I was the heir. You were just his wife. You were his partner for that chapter, sure. But I am his blood. I am the future of this family. This land is practically mine already, everyone knows it. I'm just speeding up the timeline so we don't waste years waiting for you to finally let go. You were just his wife. The air left my lungs. She didn't see me as a person. She didn't see me as her mother. She saw me as a temporary occupant of her property, an obstacle that was taking too long to get out of the way. She genuinely believed that her blood status trumped my legal name on the deed, my decades of labor and my marriage. She thought she was the queen and I was just the dowager who refused to abdicate. I am doing this, Mom, she hissed, leaning in. The contractors are paid. The dumpster is here. Unless you plan on physically fighting 4 grown men, you need to get in your truck and go. Let me handle the business. You go home and, I don't know, knit something. Just stay out of my way. I looked at the worker holding the crowbar, waiting for instructions. I looked at the crushed hydrangeas. I looked at my daughter, who looked at me with absolute contempt. I realized then that arguing was useless. She was running on a narrative where she was the hero and I was the villain holding her back. No amount of screaming would change that. She needed a wall. A hard, legal, unmovable wall. Fine, I said quietly. The fight drained out of my posture, which she interpreted as surrender. You want to handle the business? You handle it. Finally, she huffed, turning back to her phone. Bye, Mom. I walked back to my truck, the sound of tearing wood following me. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully bullied me into submission. But as I drove away, I wasn't crying this time. I was reaching for my phone to call the county building inspector's office. She wanted to talk about business? She wanted to talk about rules? She was about to find out that in the real world, you need more than a hard hat and an attitude to build a house. You need a permit. And to get a permit, you need the owner. And the owner had just left the building. There is a very specific kind of silence that falls over a house right before a thunderstorm breaks. The air gets heavy, the birds stop singing, and you can feel the pressure building in your ears. That is exactly what my kitchen felt like later that afternoon. After I left the demolition site, I didn't go home and knit as my daughter had so kindly suggested. Said I made one phone call. Just one. I called the county building department. I happen to know the clerk there, a lovely woman named Barbara who has been stamping permits since before Jessica was born. I didn't scream and I didn't cry. I simply asked, Barbara, has anyone filed a permit for a structural renovation at my address on Old Miller Road? The answer, of course, was no. I sat at my kitchen island with a cup of tea watching the driveway. I knew exactly how the timeline would play out. First, the building inspector would arrive at the barn. He would see the dumpster, the crew ripping off the siding, and the complete lack of a permit posted in the window. He would issue an immediate stop work order, That dreaded bright red tag that shuts everything down instantly. Then Jessica would try to argue with him. She would probably pull her "my dad gave me this land" speech. The inspector who cares about zoning codes and liability, not sentimental speeches, would tell her to go downtown and file the paperwork immediately or face a massive fine. And that is where the trap would snap shut. Around 4 p.m. Jessica's car pulled into the driveway. But this wasn't the aggressive entrance she usually makes, where she drifts into the spot and slams the door. She pulled in slowly. She turned the engine off and sat there for a full minute before getting out. I sipped my tea watching her through the blinds. She wasn't holding her phone to record content anymore. She was holding a thick stack of beige government documents. She walked into the house, and the change in her demeanor was so drastic it was almost unsettling. The girl who had screamed at me over the roar of a circular saw just hours ago, telling me I was just a wife and to stay out, was gone. In her place was a young woman who looked like she had just swallowed a lemon whole. She closed the front door softly, so softly the latch barely clicked. She walked into the kitchen, avoiding eye contact, and placed the stack of papers on the granite countertop. She stood there, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, picking at her fingernails. I didn't say a word. I just looked at the papers, then at her. I waited. I wanted her to be the one to break the silence. I wanted her to say it. "So," she started, her voice cracking slightly. She cleared her throat and tried to sound professional, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate kind of politeness. "I went to the county office. To, straighten out the paperwork for the project." "Oh," I said, keeping my face completely neutral. "I thought you were handling the business. Did something happen?" She flinched. "Well, apparently there was a mix-up. The inspector came by. He put a red tag on the barn. He sent the workers home, Mom. He told them if they touched another board, they'd lose their license." She took a shaky breath. "So I went to the office to file the expedited permit. I paid the rush fee. I had everything filled out." "That sounds efficient," I said, taking another sip of tea. "So what's the problem?" She looked down at her expensive work boots, the ones she had stomped around in while claiming my land. "The clerk, Barbara, she wouldn't accept the application." "Why not?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. "You're the future of the family, aren't you? Surely they know who you are." Jessica's face turned a bright, humiliating shade of pink. "She pulled the land title, Mom. She said I'm not the owner. She said the deed is in your name. Only your name. She said I have absolutely no legal standing to request a permit to hire contractors or to modify the structure. She actually laughed at me when I said Dad gave it to me verbally. She said, 'Honey, the law doesn't care about campfire promises.'" The room went quiet again. I could hear the refrigerator humming. This was the moment. The reality check I had prayed for. All her talk about vibes and legacy and blood rights had slammed headfirst into the brick wall of property law. She had taken out a personal loan. She had a dumpster sitting on my hydrangeas charging a daily rental rate. She had a crew that expected to be paid whether they worked or not. And she was completely, utterly powerless to move forward without the one thing she had tried to banish from the property. Me. She pushed the papers across the island toward me. Her hand was trembling. "The officer said the only way to lift the stop work order and avoid the fine is if the actual owner signs the retroactive permit application. Today. Before 5 p.m. She looked up at me then and I saw the panic behind her eyes. "Mom, I have money tied up in this. The contractor requires a deposit I already paid. If I can't restart the work by tomorrow, I lose the slot and I lose the deposit. I need you to sign this. Please." It was fascinating. Suddenly, I wasn't too emotional. I wasn't just a wife. I wasn't an obstacle to be told to stay out. Suddenly, I was the most important person in her world. I was the keymaster. She needed my signature, my ink, my permission, my authority, to save her from financial disaster. I looked at the paper. I saw the line marked property owner signature. It was blank, waiting for me. I looked back at Jessica, who was holding a pen out to me like it was a peace offering. She expected me to do what Mark always did. She expected me to sigh, lecture her for 5 minutes and then bail her out. She expected the signature because she was used to getting what she wanted. But she had forgotten one thing. She had told me to stay out. She had been very clear about that. And if there is one thing I have learned in my old age, It is that you should always respect a person's wishes, especially when it teaches them a lesson they will never forget. I didn't reach for the pen. I didn't reach for the papers. I just looked at her, letting the silence stretch out until it was almost unbearable. She wanted me to save her project? The project that destroyed my husband's workbench? The project she hid from me? She was about to find out that my signature wasn't just ink. It was the seal of my dignity, and it wasn't for sale. I stared at the pen hovering in the air between us. It was a nice pen, heavy, metallic, probably expensive. Just like the boots, the contractor, and the loan she had taken out. All flash, all confidence, all based on a lie she had told herself for years. Jessica's arm was starting to shake a little from holding it out so long. Her eyes were pleading, wide and watery, begging me to play my usual role. The role of the supportive mother who smooths over the cracks and cleans up the mess. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We only have like 40 minutes to get back to the office. Please." I slowly placed my teacup down on the saucer. Click. The sound was sharp in the quiet kitchen. I looked her right in the eye, and for the first time in months I felt completely calm. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a solid bedrock of resolve. "Jessica," I said softly, "do you remember what you told me this morning? In front of those men." She blinked, surprised that I wasn't grabbing the papers. I was stressed, Mom. I didn't mean it like that. "You said I was just a wife," I continued, ignoring her excuse. "You said I was an obstacle. You said I needed to stay out. You were very specific. You told me to stay out of the planning, stay out of the meetings, and stay off the property. You drew a line in the sand, Jessica. A very deep, very clear line." I know," she interrupted, her voice rising in panic. "I'm sorry, okay? I shouldn't have said that. But this is urgent. I'm going to lose $5,000 if you don't sign this right now. Can we please discuss my attitude later? Just sign the permit." She still didn't get it. She thought an apology was a currency she could trade for a signature. She thought she could insult the very foundation of my life, my marriage and my partnership with her father, and then erase it all because she was in a financial bind. I stood up. I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, I pushed the stack of papers back toward her. "No." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Jessica froze. Her mouth fell open. What do you mean, no?" "I mean no," I said, my voice steady and strong. "I am not signing that permit. I am not authorizing a renovation I never agreed to. I am not validating your theft of my property." "Theft," she shrieked. "It's my inheritance. It is my home." I shouted back, slamming my hand on the counter. The noise made her jump back. "It is my land. My name is on the deed. Not yours. Mark and I built that place from nothing while you were still a thought in our heads. You don't get to erase me just because he died. You don't get to claim blood rights over my sweat equity." I took a breath, lowering my voice. "You wanted to handle the business, Jessica? This is business. In business, you don't start construction on land you don't own. In business, you don't insult the majority shareholder. You gambled. You bet on me being too weak to stand up to you. You bet wrong." She started crying, then real ugly tears. "Mom, please. I can't afford this. The loan, the dumpster, the crew. I'll be in debt for years." "Then maybe you'll learn the value of $1, I said, crossing my arms. "Your father and I ate ramen for 3 years to buy that land. We sacrificed. You wanted a shortcut. You wanted the glory of the renovation without the respect for the history. Well, the shortcut just led you off a cliff." I walked over to the fridge and pulled down a magnet, a silly little thing we got on a family trip to Florida years ago. I looked at it, then at her. "I am calling the contractor myself in 5 minutes. I am telling him to remove his equipment immediately. I am having the dumpster hauled away tomorrow. And I am sending you the bill for the damages to the barn siding and my hydrangeas." "You can't do that," she sobbed. "I can," I said simply, "as I am the owner. And since you told me to stay out of your project, I am officially shutting your project down. You are done. The renovation is over." She stood there for a long time, sobbing, holding those useless papers. She looked like a child again, realizing that the world wasn't a playground designed for her amusement. She realized that her father's love didn't give her the right to trample her mother's dignity. Eventually she left. She took her papers and walked out the door, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She didn't slam the door this time. That was 3 days ago. The dumpster is gone. The barn is quiet. I went out there this morning with a cup of coffee. It looks rough. The siding is torn up, the grass is muddy, but it's still standing. I walked over to the spot where Mark's workbench used to be. It's gone forever and that hurts. But standing there in the silence, I didn't feel like a dowager or a placeholder. I felt like the owner. Jessica hasn't called, but she sent a text this morning. Just 2 words, I'm sorry. It's a start. She has a lot of debt to pay off and she's going to have to work hard to do it. Maybe, just maybe, earning that money will teach her the respect she never learned from getting everything handed to her. As for me, I'm thinking about planting a new garden right where she tried to build her guest house. Something with deep roots. Something that takes time to grow. Because if there is one thing I've learned from all this, it's that you can't rush a legacy. You have to nurture it, respect it, and sometimes you have to fight for it. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect your own dignity, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments, did I go too far or did she get exactly what she deserved? I'll be reading your replies. Until next time, take care of yourselves and don't let anyone tell you to stay out of your own life.